Okay.
Hi, I'm Preston Williams, and welcome to another edition of Jazz Talk. Today on our show, we have with us a very special guest. I consider him a legend. He has been on the scene for over 50 years and has worked with many greats from Jimi Hendrix to Miles Davis, Wayne Shorter, Lenny White, Tony Williams, Jaco Pastorius, Stanley Clarke, so many, Chick Corea. I can go on and on. He's worked with everyone. He is a guitarist, a Grammy Award-winning guitarist, composer, and his peers have stated him as the greatest guitarist of all time, and I agree. Please welcome to Jazz Talk, Mr. John McLaughlin. Brother, how are you?
I'm fine, Press. After that intro, I'm going to leave, okay? Let's leave with a high note. Oh, my goodness.
Man, look, it's so good to have you on the show. As I said, I started Jazz Talk a few months ago, and I've had everyone on. And Cindy Blackman Santana, who's a friend of yours, she was actually my first guest. And Cindy, she
lovely,
and I talked,
sweet Cindy, yeah.
Yeah, we talked about you. She says, yeah, Preston, she says, Carlos and I got John this thing, Bitches Brew for, I think it was your birthday or a present or something like that. She and I discussed that. Yeah. But listen, man, like I said, I'm so happy to have you on the show today. Just your background, your music background, I'm so just impressed by. I know you started on the guitar at age 11, and you just worked your way into this incredible career. One of the things that I'm fascinated by is you doing session work back in the 60s, man. I found that interesting before you really got going. And I understand that you gave Jimmy Page guitar lessons.
Yeah. We were both really young, very young. No, I mean, in the 60s in the UK, I survived by playing rhythm and blues, but rhythm and blues is fine with me. You take the R&B out of jazz and you don't have much jazz left, really, do you? You got all the harmony, but the R&B is the heart and soul of jazz, too. But that was lucky for me to be able to survive playing R&B and funk, there were funk bands. And I'd get a jazz gig every now and then, but to survive was really impossible. So when the opportunity, the thing is, in those days, if you could read music, enough where you could go into a session, they put a sheet in front of you and it's like 1, 2, 3, let's go. Then really you were in. And so for the first time, I had some money in my pocket, Preston.
Yeah.
And that feels really good, especially when you're just struggling and to survive, really.
Oh, yeah.
Survival. So I had a lot of different jobs too. Not a truck driver, but one of these van drivers and delivering. I used to selling caviar to the London hotels.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That was a strange job. Yes. Instrument repair. That was another, at least that was closer to music, but just survival. So the session thing, it was really helpful in two ways. One, I was able to pull myself out of basically the financial hole that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, even though the music, because it was pop music, really. Every now and then there'd be a radio show with a good player. And the BBC, still good in that sense, would have kind of, jazz. The other experience of being in the studio and just like being able to play whatever somebody puts in front of you, that was a really good experience. But after 18 months, I was flipping out. I couldn't hack it, And so I left and I became poor and happy again. So, but that was... the
life of a jazz musician, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think most jazz musicians know what it's like to be poor.
Yeah.
It's part of the gig.
Part of it,
But it was shortly after that, within I think about, I quit in early 68 and moved to Belgium at that time. And started playing with a free jazz band. But I got to run into people like Stu Martin. I don't know if you know Stu Martin, the American drummer who was living in Belgium. You ever heard of René Thomas?
No, I don't think so.
No, he was a great guitar player. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, we're going back, Preston. You know, I mean, the '60s already. Ronnie Thomas, you find him in Wikipedia. I
Okay.
mean, great, great jazz guitar player. And he had, what I really liked about him, he was original. If the analogy works, he kind of came from the Sonny Rollins school on
Sonny Rollins.
guitar.
Wow. Okay.
Very nice, very, very lyrical, very tasty guitar player. And I got to play with him and Stu Martin, you know, just like one-off gigs like that. And but then it was just shortly after that I got the call from Tony Williams.
Okay. I was going to ask you, even prior to that, your debut recording, Extrapolation, in 1969. Tell me about that, the concept behind that. What were you trying to say in that recording, John?
Well, first of all, it was in '68.
68. Okay.
But it came, by the time it came out, I was already in the U.S. What was I trying to say? I don't know. What are we really trying to say in music, Preston? That's a very good question. You know, after all these years, I think the only thing we can speak about, not speak, because music's unspeakable, isn't it? Is how we feel about music, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about, in short, you're telling your story, you're telling your life story, you know, and your experience up to that point of all the ups and downs and the loves and the disappointments and just the experience of life, you know. And that's all. I think even today, what am I going to say when I start playing? I'm just going to tell my life story. That's the only thing I have. The thing about music is that we learn harmony and rhythm and music, and then we put it all together, and music guides us in a way once we start playing. But we have to be disciplined, of course. It's really a question of discipline. But what I was trying to say, it was my first effort. Already I was attracted to unusual time signatures, which you will hear on that album. And you probably won't hear much of the influence of Miles and Coltrane, who are really my two heroes from the age of 15.
Oh, yeah.
Simply because the guitar at that time, it's hard to sound like Train. It's hard to play like Train on a guitar. It's hard to do the same thing with Miles.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but it was a first attempt, and you know, when I look back on it, of course, I see glaring faults, but it was the best I could do at that time. So really, that's all it was. It was just my life story at that moment in time. But it was really just before I got to play with Tony, and of course, ultimately Miles.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know, you know, speaking of Coltrane, you just mentioned him. I know A Love Supreme, that recording had a tremendous effect on you. I mean, still to this day, I've heard you talk about that recording, you know, in many interviews and even songs that you play, his masterpiece. Yeah, you know, you hooked up with Tony Williams, Tony Williams' Lifetime, What a Drummer. Tell us about that group. Short-lived, I believe, yourself, Tony, and Larry Young. You guys were only together for a short time. Is there even any footage that exists of that band? I don't think I've ever seen any footage of you guys performing.
Yeah, we did a Tonight Show simply because Flip Wilson was sitting in for Johnny Carson.
Gotcha.
So whether that's online, I would like to see that.
I would love to see it too. I'm sure they have it in the vault somewhere, but I've never seen it, you know.
No, because Tony and Flip, they were with the same management. So it was kind of like, you know, let's keep it in the family, which was really, can you imagine Lifetime going on the Tonight Show? And
oh, wow.
Because Lifetime was radical,
yeah,
to put it mildly, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was wonderful experience. Of course, because I knew Tony. The first time I heard Tony was when he played on, he must have been 18, 19, on Miles in Europe.
Okay.
You know that album?
I do. I have everything Miles Davis put
Yeah,
out.
I'm sure
It's
you do.
funny.
I can see you got Kind of Blue right behind you.
It's funny, you said that because a lot of people that I've talked to said they first heard Tony on Seven Steps to Heaven, just the drum riff. And I'm like, who is this drummer? I had Steve Gadd on last week, and we were talking about Tony. But yeah, Live in Europe. Okay. All right. Yeah, that was a great recording. Great recording.
Yeah, no, but I mean, because I was already, Miles was my hero already.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, because I've been listening to, Philly Joe, Jimmy Cobb, and then all of a sudden, Tony Williams. And what Tony did to Miles, I mean, Tony was kicking his butt.
Yeah, he was. He was.
But you hear Miles was soaring like an eagle. And that's Tony. What a drummer.
Yeah.
I mean, I just he blew me away. I mean, I was enchanted with Miles, but I became, on that album, his #1 fan, Tony's fan. So when I got the call a few years later, of course, because I started to follow Tony from that point.
Right.
And the albums he did on Blue Note with Sam Rivers.
That's right.
Remember? And Herbie was on that. And
I think Ron Carter was on one of those too.
Yeah.
Lifetime or whatever. Yeah.
We did a gig with Ron. We never had a bass player until about a year, 12, 14 months into the band. And I introduced Tony to Jack Bruce.
Oh, great bassist. Yeah, Jack Bruce.
And because Jack and I, we started to play together already 63, 64.
Okay.
And he was playing double bass at that time. It was only later he started to play. I think he got the gig, the first time he was playing bass guitar was when he got the gig with Manfred Mann, this kind of pop band, a British pop band. But at that time, around 1966, 67, I would be playing with Georgie Fame and the Blue Flames, an R&B band. Yeah, that was really nice. And we were doing things like King Pleasure, tunes, jazz tunes, Green Onions, Booker T.
Booker T, yeah, and the MGs, yeah.
Oh yeah, great. And but there was a club called the 100 Club, which was it's about 200 yards from Flamingo where we were playing, and there was a blues club. And so the blues club, you had a band like I think one of the great central characters of that era was a guy called Alexis Korner. Okay. Alexis Korner, and he was the generation ahead, but a blues man. But he had everybody in his band. Mick Jagger was in his band. Charlie Watts was in his band. Mm-hmm. Jack and Ginger were in his band. I was in his band at one point.
You talking about Ginger Baker?
Ginger Baker, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is how I got hooked up with Jack and Ginger, and with an organ player called Graham Bond, and we ended up playing together. But there were people like Eric, because John Mayall and the Blues Breakers, they were already playing at the 100 clubs, and so they'd come over, and Cyril would come over. Cyril Davies, blues harp, great player, and so they'd be like jam sessions at Flamingo with Eric Clapton, who was playing with John Mayall at that time. So, and all of this R&B and blues playing, all got mixed together. It was a beautiful era, actually, because it was very free-flowing, and everybody was just happy whenever there was a jam session going on. And this is where Jack hooked up with Eric. Jack and Ginger Baker hooked up with Eric Clapton, and they formed Cream.
Yeah.
And they went on to great success. And of course, but Jack and I, we stayed in touch. And then finally, he was coming in. Cream was over, but he was coming into the Fillmore East with his band. And I said to Tony, come on, let's go see Jack, you know. And at that point, I think it was right after that gig, Tony asked Jack to join the band.
Wow.
So it was just a short while after that. But and of course it changed then, because, you know, Jack was a star. But the first year with Larry Young, I used to call him Khalid Yassin, that was his Islamic name.
Right.
And because we were hanging out all the time, he and I'd been a fan. I was so happy because I didn't know he was going to be in the band, Larry.
Mm.
And it was only when I got to New York with Tony that I knew it was on. But I discovered Larry. Unity was that album with Woody Shaw and Joe Henderson.
Yeah, I think is Elvin Joe's on it. Yeah, Elvin. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. And then he had another album with Alvin. That I was so happy to hear that, because I grew up in the '60s. It was Hammond organ trio all the way, Preston.
Right, right.
You know, it was there all the time, which is still a great unit. Hammond organ trio,
right.
No bad. But oh yeah, where was I? No, I've lost my tail.
It's okay, man. It's okay. You know, we're talking about Lifetime, just that band.
Oh yes, Larry Young. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Because Larry had that quartal thing that McCoy brought into.
Yeah, the fourths, McCoy Tyner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, I love all of the Jimmy Smith, Jimmy McGriff, Richard Groove Holmes, Brother Jack McDuff.
Yeah,
where I first heard George Benson.
Oh yeah.
We're going back, Preston, back to the '60s.
Yeah.
And but then when Larry came on, Khalid, and that he had that thing, you know, that thing that McCoy had brought in, and I was his #1 fan. So that first year with Tony and Khalid, that was very special, because Tony wanted to move out, you know, and I wanted to move out, and I'd heard by that time, of course, I'd heard Eric Clapton play, and then I heard Jimmy play. Whom I ultimately got to meet.
And John, I wanted to ask you about that, not to cut you off. I wanted to ask you about that. I understand that you did some type of a jam session with Jimi Hendrix that from like, 2 o'clock in the morning until like 8 a.m. or something like that I was reading. You guys got a chance. What was that like, man, playing with Hendrix?
Well, it wasn't a jam session. Well, I would say it was a party. You know?
Okay.
It was in the Electric Lady studio. No, how it happened was Mitchell, who Jimmy had taken as his drummer with Noel Redding on bass. Mm-hmm. And Mitch was probably Tony's greatest admirer.
Okay.
Tony Williams' greatest admirer. So whenever Jimmy was in town with Mitch and we were playing, which we were almost living at the Vanguard at that time with the first year of the trio with Tony, Mitch would come down, and one night he was down there, and afterwards, because we knew each other from Georgie Fame, he also was with Georgie Fame. That's how we went back already quite a few years.
Yeah.
And he said, Jimmy's in the studio. Let's just go hang out, you know. And so we went there, and Larry was with me, and we got the only. It wasn't. I think this was the beginning of the Band of Gypsies, because Buddy Miles was playing drums.
Buddy Miles, yeah.
And I mean, and Buddy, I love Buddy. Buddy had a boogaloo. I mean, unbeatable.
Yeah.
Wrestling, unbeatable. God bless him.
Yeah.
What a boo. And we started to hang out too. So I got to meet through, I met Jimmy on that night, but it was very crazy. There were a lot of musicians and we jammed, but it was hard for me. I had this hollow body guitar. I mean, the volume was like 92 dB in the studio.
Yeah.
You know, it was like a wall of amps. And there were another two guitar players that I never got to meet, actually. It was a crowd in there, and girls, and, you know, party time. And well, we jammed, but I had a hard time because to crank up the volume to play with those solid body Stratocasters, my guitar was freaking out. But we had fun, and I got to meet him. And what a gentle person he was. What a lovely person he was.
Yeah.
And subsequently, because of through my friendship with Buddy, Buddy would invite me to. I remember they were playing at the Garden one time, so I went down there and I saw, and I met Jimmy again there. What a lovely guy he was.
Mm.
But it's funny, I have a little anecdote about I remember once I was at Miles's house and I was talking about Jimmy, because Jimmy, he had this, already by 1966, I wasn't too happy with this cool jazz tone, you know. I'm listening to Coltrane, you know, and not just I Love Supreme, but all the others, you know, Intergalactic Space.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and Ohm, and Train is, he's going for these notes. It's not just a note. It's sometimes like he hit 2 notes, 3 notes, and that he's coming out of his saxophone. And the great thing, what Jimmy showed me with the guitar, I mean, take for example the way he plays the Star Spangled Banner. What he did with the guitar. I mean, it's just a piece of art, that for me. And already by 67, I wanted more tone. I didn't want this classical tone. I wanted to hear the harmonics, you know, and Jimmy really showed us the way with that. I think Eric Clapton had a hand in that too.
Yeah.
In any event, you know, it was to have this, to go for the sound, and Jimmy, I think he changed the guitar world forever. Anyway, make the story short, I was at Miles's house and I was talking about the impact Jimmy had on me. And he'd never seen Jimmy play. And it must have been 69. Yeah, it would be 69. And so he had a copy of the Village Vanguard at his house. And I saw one of the art cinemas downtown was showing the Monterey Pop. You know the movie?
Oh, yes, I've seen it. Yeah.
And it's nice. I mean, there was Ravi Shankar was playing there with Alaraka, but Jimmy was playing. And so I said to Miles, I said, I'm going to take you to the movies. So I took him to the movies that afternoon.
And I know the story that you're about to tell because I've heard you tell it.
And so finally Jimmy comes on and he starts playing them. Miles is sitting next to me. Damn. I mean, he subsequently met with Jimmy. I didn't even jam together, but I wasn't there, unfortunately. But that
Blue
must
Miles,
have been some meeting.
Miles Davis's mind was blown, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Well.
Oh, man. That was wonderful to see.
Yeah.
But Jimmy had that thing, you know, and that's, you know, it's all Coltrane's fault, man. You know, he got this tone into my soul, and so since then it's you know, the sound of the tone.
Yeah.
Need the impact of the tone, and it's not that I'm knocking this classical sound with the Wes Montgomery and Joe Pass and the beautiful guitar players, Todd Farlow,
right?
This kind of tradition, Pat Metheny, Farlow. I mean, it's wonderful, but it's just I wanted I wanted more. That's all.
Yeah, I got you. You know, I was going to ask you because you know we're talking about Miles Davis. How did you hook up with him? And of course, you were on some of his most important recordings. Of course, "Bitches Brew," which is, oh gosh, seems like once Miles dropped that, all musicians or all music seems like it went in that direction. And I was just talking to Lenny White about that. He was on that recording, but just brilliant. Still stands up, you know, 51 years later. But what was it like working with Miles on that recording, John?
Well, I was really lucky because after, in a silent way, somehow I got through this baptism of fire because it was just really by chance. When I arrived in New York to play with Tony and Larry, Tony had 1 week to finish at the Club Baron in Harlem, which is where we rehearsed because Tony had his drums there. And Miles, of course, Tony had told Miles he was leaving. Miles wasn't happy because Miles loved Tony. Everybody loved Tony. He was unique. And he knew, he'd heard about that he was getting some guitar player in from Europe. Because I was living in Belgium by that time. And that night, I remember he even knew my name, which blew my mind because I was in the Club Baron. I come up with Tony, and all of a sudden the front door opens and Miles walks in. And it was winter time. It was right after my birthday, January the 4th. And it's freezing cold. And Miles walks in, he's got this black cape on. I mean, the most handsome, cool, everything. He had everything. And so he walks in and I'm looking at him like, and my jaws dropped. There is my hero walking in the door. And he sees me and he walks towards me and then he just slides by. He goes, John, and keeps walking. So, and the next day I saw him, and because Tony went, I went with him he had to get paid. And Miles seen me, said, bring your guitar to the studio tomorrow. That was it.
Wow.
And I was already shaking. I didn't, it's the last thing I expected. And that was in the silent way. And I somehow got through that, which was a nerve-wracking experience, not what I expected. But Tony was on the gig, and my old brother in arms, Dave Holland, because Dave and I.
Dave is great.
Dave and I, we were, in fact, we shared an apartment. Well, we didn't share an apartment. He had an apartment, and I, every time I came to the UK, I stayed with him. Anyway, but Dave was on the gig, and we went back years because he was in one of my bands, one of the rare jazz bands that I had. That was the band actually that was on Extrapolation with John Sermon, baritone sax, and Tony Oxley on drums, Jeff Klein on bass. Anyway, so after In a Silent Way, Miles, he would call me at least twice a week to come by his house, and always, bring a guitar. So I bring the guitar, and I started hanging out with Miles at his house, which was such an amazing experience. But I figured pretty quick, because the last 10 years I've been playing R&B and funk, and Miles, he'd hit it. He didn't play the trumpet, but he had a piano, and he hit a chord or a couple of chords. He said, "What do you hear? What do you hear?"
He did great Miles Davis impersonations, man. I'm telling you.
No, riff there, John. No, so yeah, what about some Wakachoo? Do the Wakachoo. So, for the next few months, right up until Bitches Brew, I got to know him very well.
Yeah.
And so when we went in the studio for that recording, in a way, he didn't know what he wanted, but he knew what he didn't want. And so we'd start playing. He set us up with the beat, and be like, I don't know, he'd say something like to the bass player, play less.
That's it?
Yeah. And he'd be like, be giving him just instructions. and as soon as we hit the groove, that was it.
Okay.
And he kind of directed the groove, you know, in terms of dynamic and space. And he'd set it up. We'd be playing, and he'd just turn to somebody, play, and that would be it, you know. And they start playing, and then, you know, he'd stop, and then things would be moving. I mean, they edited a great deal on those tapes, but this and then if the groove was still happening, then he'd point, you know, to me or to somebody else, play. That was it. That really was it. And so and each piece we'd go by with Miles really directing everybody. But the principal thing was, what kind of groove are we going to hit?
Yeah.
What kind of groove? And once the groove is there, then he can sculpt it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's what he did. He would sculpt things. He would take things away from the music until it fit him just nice, you know, just the way he wanted it. Incredible. But sometimes, you know, we start playing and we felt we had a really nice thing happening. He said, so stop, you know. And I know, and I remember one time, was it Lenny he went up to? I don't know if Lenny, and he leaned over. We'd all stop, and he'd go, boom, boom, boom. Okay. And that was it.
Those are the instructions.
That was the instruction.
Wow.
But it was beautiful to see him in action.
Yeah.
You know, and I learned so much from him. I mean, from the age of 15, since I was his fan.
That's incredible, man. What an incredible experience. Now, I wanted to move on a little bit. Of course, you know, you had several recordings with Miles, you know, Live Evil and some of the other ones that you did. Now, how did you create this Mahavishnu Orchestra, which still to this day blows my mind? I still play the Intermounting Flame all the time. And I'm like, that particular recording had an influence, John, on so many people. I'm sure you know, you've talked to Chick about this. Chick took Stanley Clarke to see you guys, and they were blown away, and they went electric after that. Al Di Meola confirmed that with me when I had him on the show, that when they saw you guys, it was just like unbelievable. Tell me about the Mahavishnu Orchestra. How did you create that? What was your thing behind that? What were you trying to say? What is Mahavishnu?
Well, you know, one of my gurus, not just in music, but in a spiritual sense, if I use that word, was John Coltrane. Extremely important and encouraging a difficult time in my life where you're searching for inner truth, if that's the right way to put it, or enlightenment. You know, there are lots of ways, but what's you know, this great question, who am I and why am I here? Yes, I'm a musician, but you know, because it takes time to address these great questions.
Yes.
The existential questions of life, they take time. And so I started already doing yoga at the end of the 60s, and I would read, of course, I was playing A Love Supreme, but the poem on the back of A Love Supreme on the LP was a marvelous piece of inspiration that I used to read all the time, because the music and the poem or prayer were coming from the same place. And so what I was impelled to address these questions. And so I was with different spiritual teachers, yogis, yoginis. I was with the Sufis, whom I still adore. Sufism is the mystical side of Islam. And I ended up staying with my guru, meditation guru called Sri Chinmoy, who out of the blue gave me this name, Mahavishnu, which is great Vishnu. He's part, Maha means great, and Vishnu is one of the Hindu pantheon. You have Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the three aspects of the absolute. I know we could talk for a long time about that, but I'd like to keep it shorter. So this became my spiritual name. But the band, I have Miles is behind that too, Preston.
Really? Oh.
Yes, because there was a club called Laney's on the Turnpike, just outside of Boston. And this was kind of a critical point. I'd had a really difficult night with Miles. You know, I was fighting. I was fighting myself. I was fighting my instrument. I was inarticulate, and you know, believe me, all the musicians know about that. And I was apologizing. And in the end, it was just him and me in the band room. Everybody else had gone, and I was like apologizing to Miles, and he knew exactly what I was talking about. He said, "You gotta go with the flow, John." You know. And anyway, so we're talking there, and I just, you know, he's making me feel better. God bless him. And then out of the blue, he said, "This time you formed your own band."
Really? Wow.
Yes, yes. That was out of the blue. So the last thing I expected, really. That was the last thing. But the fact that it was him that said it, I had to do it. I had to do it only to justify him. You know, I had no plans. I was still playing with Tony. I was playing with Miles. I had the best of all possible worlds, Preston.
Sure did, yeah.
But he said, "No, it's time." So, because I said, you know, I said, "Are you kidding?" Right? You know, no, he was serious. And so I said about it, and another ironic side to that. So I started about it, but before I get to that, I had met on the Jack Johnson album, Billy Cobham.
Yes, great drummer.
Yes, indeed. And after that recording, he and I got real tight, and we were hanging out together. And then when Miles gave me the order, he was the first person I called, actually. So I had him and Rick Ladd, who I was playing with in the UK with Brian Auger at that time. Really fine organ player, fine pianist too. And all of a sudden, I got a call just about 2 months later from Miroslav Vitus.
Yes, with Weather Report. Yep.
Well, and the phone call, because I'd known Miroslav since the UK, and I met him when he was there with Stan Getz.
Right.
And we started to hang out there already. And then when I moved to New York, we got really tight. And he said, "John," he said, "Wayne and Joe and me were forming a band called Weather Report. We want you to be in it." So I said,
"Oh, wow."
Yeah. So I said, "Oh man, what a great idea." I said, "But you know, I'm under orders from Miles." I said, I have to form my own band. And he said, well, you need a keyboard player? I said, "Yeah, I do." He said, he's a friend of mine from Prague, Jan Hammer. I said, "Well, what's he doing?" He said, "Well, right now he's out on the coast with Sarah Vaughan." I said, "He's playing with Sarah Vaughan?" I said, "I want him. Give me his number."
Right.
No, if he's playing with Sarah Vaughan, you know he's all right.
Right.
You know he's all right. So I called him. I didn't even hear him play. I called him. I said, I'd like you in the band, you know. And he was ready. He was ready to move out. A lot of people were wanted to move out. Tony wanted to move out of this. You know, by the end of the '60s, Miles, the work that Coltrane and Miles had done with the classical groups, you know, it was incredible. But by the end of the '60s, things were moving, things were changing. The whole society was changing. And so when society's changing, the music changes with it. The whole black and white thing, you know, people like Sly and the Family Stone. Yep. I mean, the beautiful, nice, and a mixed band. And Miles always said the best bands are the mixed bands, you know, and which puts the lie to you know Miles very, you know, cold, and he was the opposite of that. But he liked to make fun of white American journalists. So, but anyway, that aside, there was this whole movement with rock and roll booming, and people like Jimmy and Sly and the Family Stone and James Brown. I know Miles loved James Brown. You know, we all love James. James is a monster.
Yeah.
And fun with Pretty Boy Purdy on drums, whom I got to play with just a couple of jams at some point. And so the whole of music, you know, and the Vietnam War, the black and white thing was just, it was all, society was in upheaval, and the music was changing. And so, but there were two directions. And I already heard, and I heard a radio broadcast of Miles in 1967 from some French radio. And the band was like moving in two directions. There was this free jazz movement. And I could hear Jack DeJohnette was playing, Chick was playing, and Chick ultimately, he moved into that with Anthony Braxton, Barry Altschul, remember? And
yeah, Dave, I remember that. Yeah, they were like avant-garde. They were out there. I remember that group.
Yeah, I mean, but they were moving towards this free thing. And I had an experience in around early 60s, no, in the middle of 66 or something like that with a free jazz band. And it didn't sit tight with me. Yeah. The thing about this broadcast with Miles is that Miles is playing, and the beat was always so strong with Miles. I mean, impeccable, Miles. He was impeccable. And then you hear this movement. Even Herbie was kind of like moving out. No, not Herbie. Herbie, yeah, it was Herbie in 67. The Chick joined after that. He must have joined in 68. Anyway, and I hear Miles, and I hear this kind of dichotomy in the band. There's this two elements. The one is Miles is just hitting the beat, and the others are like, you know, moving away, more fluid, more, you know that free movement. But Miles wanted the beat. And so when I arrived, I happened to be at the right time at the right place. You know, he wanted a guitar. So I just got really lucky in that sense. And so that graduation to Mahavishnu, there was a violin player, because my mother was a violin player, Preston. I loved the violin. And, but it was strange. I wanted an R&B player. And that's why I found Jerry Goodman. He was playing with a band called Flock out in Chicago. And it's amazing that band only stayed together a couple of years, but it caused quite a wave, didn't it?
I was going to ask you, John, real quick. I was talking to Dennis, and I think Billy Cobham. I had Billy on too about a month ago. He's still in Switzerland. There was a recording that you guys did that was supposed to be the best of all of them, even better than Birds of Fire and the Intermounting Flame, but it never came out. I think he had mentioned that to me. There was like another recording, but
just tapes.
Yeah,
the lost tapes. No, it did come out.
Oh, it did come out? Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
There was, you know, it was really a shame, because I was into my trip. which I'm still into, means, I do my meditation, I do my yoga, because that's the meaning of my life, is, the answer to all answers, to know who you are, the answer to all questions. And so that's a practice. And I never tried to get anybody involved to meditate with me or to do that. But, I had a different lifestyle. At the end of a gig, I go back and have some vegetarian food and go to sleep, or, or do a little meditation or yoga before. The guys would be out and it would be like party time. And why not? I mean, I did that, but I wasn't into that at that time. I spent 5 years with quite a rigorous discipline, but that's what I wanted, But being the leader, it caused friction.
Sure.
It just caused friction simply by being like that, even though, they can do whatever they want. Who am I to say, do this or that to anybody?
Right.
And, but it caused friction. And to the point where Jan and Jerry, it just got too much for me. And I said, I don't want to, you guys are not talking to me anymore, so how can you play with me if you don't want to talk to me? So I said, we'll just go to the end, and then what gigs we have. And it was regrettable, really. Billy and I, we jammed together. He might have mentioned that in his interview.
Yeah.
In Switzerland at Montreux Festival, really spontaneously.
Okay.
About 4 or 5 years ago.
No, we didn't talk about that, but is that footage available on YouTube, or is there a DVD of it?
It's the Montreux. No, it was just a jam session. I got a call. I was there. I wasn't even booked to a gig, but we used to go there with me and my family every year just to hang out.
Wonderful.
Even if I wasn't playing there. And we were on bikes at the other side of the lake, and got a call from Claude Nobbs, who was the
Claude Nobbs, yeah.
Yeah, the great Claude Nobbs. And he said, John, I'm in trouble. There's this band that's supposed to play tonight. They're stuck in Montreal. He said, can you play? He said, I'll get Billy. Billy's in Bern, in Switzerland. I said, you can get Billy? I said, I don't have a guitar. He said, I've got guitars. I said, fine, I'm in. So
Great.
Billy and we went on stage. We did a set of the old tunes.
Just the two of you?
Yeah, just the two of us.
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
It was far out, because it was like all of the stuff that's in the memory. It's amazing how the music stays in the memory, isn't it?
It does. I mean, you guys, like I said, did some great stuff. John, I wanted to ask you a couple more questions. Like I said, you did so many other things, of course, in the 70s with various groups, but I'm interested in talking to you because I had Al DiMeola on, and we were talking about Friday night in San Francisco, and he told me, he says, John was just so happy because he didn't know that there was another night, Saturday. And he said he's got the tapes and something is supposed to come out next year. But he said that particular recording was his biggest seller. He says John's biggest seller and Paco's. He said it was just incredible. But tell me, what was that like, man? Doing that, the three of you guys. I believe it took place in the 79 or 80. But what was that like playing with those guys, man?
It was 80 or 81. No, 80. I think it came out in 81. At what was the name of the theater in San Francisco? It was all acoustic guitars, no electric guitar. But this started because when I was growing up, before I even had an electric guitar, I only played acoustic guitar. I'm coming out of classical world, because I studied classical piano first. So I only knew the acoustic guitar, and I got exposed to flamenco music when I was really young, which marked me forever, really. And I love the way the Hispanic influenced Miles too. That really. In fact, when he heard the second movement of this piece I wrote for guitar and orchestra, and and I played it for him in his hotel one room. And that it opens on flugelhorn. I wrote it for him, and I said, "No, I wrote this for you, Miles." And he heard the second one. He said, "Now you can die, John."
Oh man, I tell you.
Anyway, but the flamenco thing, and there was a time when I moved back to the acoustic guitar because I love the acoustic guitar, and and I heard Paco, and I contacted Paco. I was in Paris, and luck, it was meant to be, because he happened to be in Paris at the same time. This would be 1978.
78.
And we met the next day, and he knew of me, and I said, you know, if there's any way we can work together. He brought his guitar. We sat down and played right then. It was just phenomenal. And we started actually with Larry Coryell.
Oh, well, Larry was great.
Yeah,
God rest his soul. We lost him a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. What a fine musician. But in any event, there was at some point Larry had to quit, and Al came in, and this is where because he's pretty fiery too, and the two of them, between Paco and Al together, I mean, they're on my case. You know what I mean? So yeah. And so of course, you know, and we got some, you know, very justified criticism of like playing too many notes and playing too fast, you know, but inside all that, there is a lot of love. There's a lot of feeling and excitement and admiration, a mutual admiration and affection between the whole thing. And I think this came through the notes, and people, it was new. No one had heard anything like this before, and it hit at the right time, Preston.
The recording still holds up, John. I mean, you're talking over 40 years, and people still talk about that recording. It was just tremendous. One of the greatest, you know, recordings we've ever heard, with the three of you guys just giving your all. And it's funny, Al would say, he said, man, he says, I would look over at John, and John would play something. He's like, oh man, how am I gonna, you know, what am I gonna do to you know, I got to come up with something to come, you know, to fit. It was just mind boggling. He was just like, wow, listening to you guys. And he says, what am I going to play that's going to be just as good or going to fit that? So it just incredible, man. Just beautiful music. Listen, I wanted to fast forward a little bit because we can talk all day, and I actually had promised to keep this to a half an hour, but I wanted to ask you about something special that happened to you in 2017. You received an honorary doctorate from Berklee, man. What was that like receiving that?
I was honored. It was an honorary doctorate, and I was truly honored. I've been associated with Berklee for many years. I sent a number of students, you could say, to Berklee, and it was really one of the first jazz schools, because growing up for me, my teacher was the gramophone, the LP. Yeah. And I used to annoy my family constantly by lifting. I said, I gotta hear this bit again. I'm sorry, you know, lifting, you know, this. Anyway, you know, the cap and the gown, it's symbolic and meaningful, because it's just, yes, the document is just a piece of paper physically, but to have that kind of recognition, the level of that recognition is very high, and it's esteem. And so I was deeply touched. I really was. I was profoundly touched by that.
And well-deserved, man, well-deserved. Like I said, you're a hero to so many, and just your body of work. I mean, you've been on the scene for almost 60 years, and I actually think you should have received it before then, but I'm glad you got that. It, you know.
Well, it's very sweet of you, Preston. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Definitely, definitely. But listen, I want to thank you so much for being on Jazz Talk. You're a class act, John. And I do look at you as the greatest guitarist on the scene. I mean, Pat Metheny and Jeff Beck both said that, and I agree with them. I mean, like I said, you've changed just so much. But I'm so happy you were on here. Hang on, I'm about to close out the show. Well, you've heard it from the great John McLaughlin. And as the saying goes, if the music grooves and makes you move, it must be jazz. I'm Preston Williams with Jazz Talk signing off. Peace.
Thank you, Preston.